Hey, folks, and welcome to the show. It is Counter Clipping Show number 142 for September 25th, 2023. Let me flip the banner on and remind everybody to please thumbs up the video and subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed. There was some question about whether I was going to make the 8 p.m. time slot today because I had somebody here fixing the lawnmower and he came a couple hours late. We did get it fixed, so that's cool. And we got him out of here before, well, about 15 minutes ago, let me put it that way. So we did not have to create some kind of scheduling problem where we had to go live at 9 or anything like that. So I'd like to give a big shout out to new swordsman level patron Stephen Lee. Thank you, Stephen. Your support is much appreciated. If anybody else would like to become a patron of Ardwulf's Lair, there is links to do that in the video description, as well as the merch store and stuff like that. And for anybody who hasn't seen the new shirt, I'm not going to show it again because I don't have the image handy and pulled up because I was unable to do very much in the way of prep for this particular show because of the lawnmower guy. So sorry about that. But other than that, we are going to talk about Yaquinto and Battleline in that order. And I'm aware that it is a inverse chronological order, but that's because I feel like Yaquinto's stuff gets a little less attention, in part because it didn't mostly get reprinted by Avalon Hill. So we're going to hit Yaquinto first. We are drinking the last of the Ardbeg Wee Beastie, and glad we are to see it go. Although, like I keep saying, it's not awful, it's just boring. So that is, I'll be happy to put this to bed. And we are clipping Enemy Action Ardennes because I had to grab something to clip off the shelf, and I didn't want to grab another Civil War game because I've been over the last couple of shows clipping Death Valley, and that's all clipped now, and I'm in the organization phase of it, so I didn't want to confuse my head with some other Civil War Order of Battle trying to clip their counters tonight. So the 62 stuff is done. I'm working on the 64 stuff, but there's about twice as much 64 stuff as there is 62 stuff. So Brian Jarvis is drinking Maker's Mark. Pretty good choice. So let's say hello before we get any further to Advanced Squad Leader Spotting Round, Alan Salazar, Bob Kowalczyk, Brent McKay, Brian Jarvis, Brian Gash, Krusty Captain, Dana Shadell, welcome to the show. Doug Blayart, Fast Hines, HUN644 New, the legend himself, Fucko, is here. Jack Parker, Jack, welcome to the show. Jeff Anderson, Jeff Beeler, Jeffrey Wesovich, Joe Faust from sunny Northeast Ohio. It actually wasn't super sunny most of the day, but it wasn't terrible. Joe Perez, Joe Mentum, John C. from the sunny Philippines, John Clark, Lee Grant, Matt Davidson, Meandering Mike, Michael Simon, Mike Burnett, Nordic Maelstrom, Perfidious Albion, Ray Garby, Rob Johnson, Rob Moffat, Roger Hemsath, Rudy Armendariz, Stacking Limit. Stigler is here. Stigler, you're going to definitely want to tune in Thursday. We have a very exciting show just for you. Tim Greenhaw, Tim Zales, Todd Cox, Vicky, welcome back to the show. Vince Ree, William Aarons, William Bird, and Winterson. I apologize for whoever I have missed. I'm sure I've missed at least some people. Giving it a scan. It's hard to say because of things. So the ticker is up. So we have Stuka Joe is here as well, and Mark Hodgkinson. Joe, welcome back, and Mark as well. Eric Goebel. Eric Gable. Goebel. It's Goebel. Says Goebel. I don't know how you pronounce it. So we got 106 people watching already, so that is spectacular. I want to thank everybody once again for coming out. We do have a whole pile of news and other items to go through. And we're going to start with this one. So between last show and this show, this all happened. They put out the last call over at Multiman Publishing for Goose Green. This is the latest in the Tactical Combat series. This is a quite small game. It is one map and I believe half a counter sheet. It is going to be an ideal introduction to TCS. So I was a late orderer. A number of folks have gotten theirs in the last few days. I didn't order mine until like June, but I got charged today. So if you have ordered this and haven't been charged yet, I'd be shocked if you didn't get charged tomorrow. Mine is probably could even be here by the end of the week, shipping from the Maryland area. Maryland area seems to be pretty fast. So that is a different formation. So let's get that straight. So this is, like I said, a very small TCS game. TCS is a very interesting system. This is about the Battle at Goose Green in the Falklands War. We don't see a lot of traffic on the Falklands War, and I have to admit that it is not a topic of special interest to me. But for the $24 pre-order price, we couldn't really beat that. I did share the last call around on social media, so hopefully people did catch that. It doesn't actually say anymore uh, how many people pre-ordered it. So, but it was over 550 or whatever the number was. It was placed on the catalog in February. I'm going to point this out, and it's shipping in September, mid-September. So, um, that's a pretty good turnaround, right? MMP. So this is one of the sort of differences between the way MMP does pre-orders and the way GMT does pre-orders, for example. Latest in the TCS series. This will be like number 8 or 9 TCS game I've got. We're probably going to play this. I don't know if we're going to play. So let me talk about that before we get to the next news item. Actually, so we have wrapped last Blitzkrieg. I may have mentioned that last week. In fact, I think I did mention that last week, and we started playing PQ-17 from GMT. It's pretty interesting, but by the time I got to the game last Wednesday, I was absolutely cooked. So, because there was just a lot going on at work over the last several weeks, and that was a huge part of it. I really was not getting it, but there's definitely some interesting things going on there. It's a game about the Arctic convoys that were shipped by the Western Allies to the Soviets. One of those convoys, PQ-17 itself, had a sort of infamous story, which I'm not going to repeat because I am not familiar enough with it to confidently do that. But you can look Convoy PQ-17 up. There are a few games on this topic, not a lot though. There are a few. There's an Against the Odds game. There's a S&T game from several years ago, and there's one or two other things. So there's maybe 5 games on Arctic Convoys. Our next game in line after PQ-17, which we don't expect to take more than another few weeks on, is going to be Napoleon's Last Gamble. I think we're probably going to play Waterloo and then play the campaign, and I don't expect that to take an enormous amount of time either. After that, we might do Goose Green, but we might do something bigger too. So, Bob Kowalczyk, I'll see if I can say something about this at some point tonight too. So our next news item is, in fact, as John Longshore let me know about earlier, that the last call has been put out for the Axis Empires Ultimate Edition. And I don't know that the email correspondence said this, but the Ty Bomba post on Facebook did. The deadline to get the pre-order price of $240 is Friday, this Friday. I have pre-ordered this. I have played Axis Empires before. It is very good. I have high hopes for this. I'm a little worried about Schiffskrieg and see if it's going to screw the rest of the game up, but it's also pretty expensive. But in fairness, you are getting a ton of material in here as well. So there's going to be 4 maps. I think it's like a 9 counter sheets, something like that. 2,300 counters, 5 rules booklets, 500 cards. It's a lot of stuff. So and like I said, pre-order 240. That's rich, man. But I've played this before, and it's if you're into strategic level World War II, as I am, this is worthwhile. Are these the right ones? These are the right ones, I think. Yeah, I think so. We'll figure it out. All right. So the other thing is that this game system has a bit of a history. It has. This is friggin' fancy looking too, to be completely honest about it. Anyway, so this is originally released as Krieg, later is released as Totaler Krieg, and then still later is released as Axis Empires Totaler Krieg, which then has a Pacific version called Axis Empires Daisenso. And I think Daisenso is less worthwhile played by itself, but played alongside the European game, I think it's still pretty good. This will include the new edition of both of those games, which will, there's some revision happening here, and as well as the expansion that was originally announced as just a standalone expansion, and then they decided they're going to redo the whole thing. There's also going to be what's called Dice of Decision, just kind of a random initial starting state generator that sounds fairly interesting. That was part of an earlier edition of Krieg. I want to say the first Totaler Krieg, I think, is where that made its appearance. And for some reason, it did not make it into Axis Empire's Totaler Krieg, but it's coming back here. And then Schiff Krieg, which is going to provide an alternate air and naval system to replace the very abstract one that is in the core game. Now, that very abstract one actually works really well in Europe. It works less satisfyingly in the Pacific. So we'll see what it looks like. We'll see what it looks like. This is a three-man design. Alan Emmerich, Dave Prowell, and Salvatore Vasta. These are all solid designers. Who worked hardest on the revision, I don't know. So Tim Zales, I would say yes, but I don't have the other version anymore either. But I got rid of the old one because this was coming out. This is like a couple of years late, right? This has been cooking for quite a while. I'm not Stigler. I'm not trying to pronounce it in German at this exact moment. So I'm from Ohio. We pronounce things however we want here. Remember, totally. Anyway, all right. So we're going to get into the next news item, which is the GMT September update. This will take a little bit longer, and of course, we didn't load the friggin' thing. So how about that? All right, monthly update. So let's move this over here so I can actually read it. All right. So GMT has finished the P500 shipments that began on August 31st. They are preparing for the next shipment, which will ship Monday, September 25th. We'll get into this later on in the list. There we go. All right, Mr. President second edition and second edition upgrade kit. So the reprint of Mr. President is not going to be just a reprint. It is going to be a second edition. And they go into the reasons why in this little piece. There will be an upgrade kit available for those who own the first printing. I'll probably buy the upgrade kit. I feel like significant ado has been made out of the errata problems in Mr. President, which are not negligible, but I don't think they are game busting either. So for anybody that has the original edition, maybe you want the upgrade kit, which is pretty cheap considering what's in it. But otherwise, I wouldn't be too worried about it. So the upgrade kit will have 6 cards, which are presumably replacement. One or two of those might be new. 16 counters, which are also on the replacement counter sheet. 4 of these are minor errata. There's not a lot to errata on the counters, to be honest. Most of the errata is from the books or the cards. There's, I think, 1 or 2 pieces of errata from the boards as well. Plus replacements for basically all of the books. So that's a lot. There will also be game enhancements to make the game more challenging in years 3 and following, and add features, importance, and more difficult choices like this stuff. So the second edition will be $110 of retail, pre-order of $69, and the update kit will be $15 P500 price. So $30, even $30 is pretty good for all those books. $15 is pretty good, but you're also you're going to pay, even if you're in the US, you're going to pay another $15 to ship the friggin' thing. So there's that. This is true, but I think that's because we are generally, unless we took French, which I did, but it's been a long time, that we are just more exposed to German in wargaming, right? For reasons that ought to be obvious. So back to where the shit did it go? Hold on. There we go. All right. So the update kit is suitable to use as a vassal play kit. So that's fine. It's interesting that they're encouraging people that if you want to play it on Vassal or TTS, you really just need the update kit. That's a little unprecedented, and I don't know that I've given it an enormous amount of thought. I do feel there are some ambiguities in the rules that we saw in terms of the playthrough that I did. I didn't feel like any of them were totally impenetrable, but one of them was problematic, where it didn't really explain how you close out a war. I found that to be a problem. I do still want to do a Mr. President wrap-up video, but I have not had the time. There's been a lot of stuff going on. A lot of that's been work. There's been a lot of extra work at work lately. There's been a project that is just now entering this week its go live phase. So hopefully that will slack up a little bit. And then I've had plenty of other stuff going on, including broken lawnmowers and other bullshit. So, GMT replacement counter sheet, they sent that to the printer about a week ago as of whenever this came out, which was several days ago at this point. I want to say this came out last Thursday, something like that. Um, Here is the picture of the replacement counter sheet. I don't know if they've added anything to this or not. They might have. So we're not going to go through all this again. There is an update on the Frank Chadwick ETO series, which is great. I have not read the update yet. And it's Alan Emmerich is pretty much the project manager for this. Beyond that, if you think that this game looks interesting, and I will certainly say that it has loads and loads of potential, but Thunder in the East felt not quite fully baked. And I think that's especially obvious in light of the weight of additional rules and other changes that have occurred as part of the subsequent development of this series. But nevertheless, I haven't been paying super duper close attention to this just because it feels like it's a ways away yet, but I will be excited to check it out when the next piece in the puzzle is close. There is a fourth printing of For the People. This is a classic US Civil War game. I highly encourage people to play this. It's magnificent. There is a new map for it in this new edition. It's by Terry Leeds. This is it. It looks really nice. I personally think the old one looks fine too, but this is probably nicer. I'd have to compare them side by side, but Terry Leeds does amazing work. So there's no problems with that. So Meandering Mice says that Alan is the project manager and lead developer on Thunder in the East, which sounds right? More or less what I said, right? All right, we got to get this set up so it's not going to fall off as soon as I go to something else. All right, so and if you buy the fourth printing, there will be a 3-inch box. That's how I'm reading this anyway. I actually got everything in a 2-inch box in a case of For the People, but hell, I'd rather any game with cards and a mounted map, in my opinion, ought to be in a 3-inch box, just for that. Other mounted maps coming along the pipeline: Clash of Sovereigns / Clash of Monarchs, France 1940, and Normandy 44. That getting a 3-inch box as well, which is interesting because that's not even in a 2-inch box. That's in an 1.5-inch box. France 1940 is one of the few of the Zokban games I don't have. I don't have Ukraine 43 either, and it's also supposed to be very good, at least if you get the second edition. Joseph Syverson, I also hope for an update kit of some kind for Thunder in the East. And I want to say that's where they are, but like I said, I haven't been paying super close attention to it. So France 1940, somebody was asking on Facebook the other day, what is a good game on that campaign? And a lot of people did say either France 1940 or Case Yellow or Victory in the West, all from GMT. I said Blitzkrieg Legend from MMP and the Gamers. That's the best game on the subject that I have played with it because it's a game that solves the problem of simulating that campaign without goosing the factors. Not that these other games don't, because I haven't played any of them. A few people actually said the old SPI / Avalon Hill France 1940 as well. Whatever that was called. France 40? France 40? That sounds France 1940. I forget. That's the Jim Dunnigan game, though. All right, so here's the back of the box to Rebel Fury. This is the Mark Herman project, and there's 6 battles in this thing. Everything looks really nice. I want to say that the maps were originally supposed to be done by Rick Barber, but as far as the finished maps, looks like Charlie Kibler did them. It looks like that it's hard to tell from this, right? It looks like that may have been done from Rick Barber Cartography. That is a thing that did happen a lot, actually. A lot of the Labatai games that don't have map art by Rick Barber nevertheless have map cartography by Rick Barber. So as we can see, we got Chickamauga and Chattanooga, the Wilderness in Spotsylvania, and Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. Both Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville are games that we don't see a ton of, or battles that we don't see a ton of games on, so that's fairly interesting. And for that matter, thinking about it, although we have several games on the Wilderness coming along soon-ish, there's not that many games on the Wilderness, not that many on Spotsylvania. There are some on Chickamauga. Chickamauga is reasonably well represented, but Chattanooga not so much. Jeff Beeler says he does not recommend Europa's Fall of France. It's not a good fit for the Europa system. I wholeheartedly agree. I think Fall of France from Europa is with the caveat that I consider all Europa to have monumental flaws. I think the France 1940 Europa is exceptionally bad in this regard. I think it's probably the biggest turd of the entire series, if you ask me. All right, so moving along, and yes, the box does say Charlie Kibler on the back. Now, here's the new France 1940 back of the box. I think this does have kind of two separate games, Sickle Cut and Dynamo, which I'm not sure if you play them back to back, if that's the idea or not. I have the sense that that is not the case, but I have this on pre-order. I'll be happy to buy this, no problem. Mark Simonich, Zach Bonds, it's all good. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I literally have done an entire show on this, so we're not going to go into this again. Ooh, no, I don't think this is particularly close to Black Swan at all. Actually, this is a descendant of the. I hate to put it this way because I know I'm not the only person to have had not a positive experience with the Gettysburg game that appeared in C3I a few years ago. But then I thought the same system got, tweaked and refined and rescaled, and I thought worked pretty well in the Waterloo game. And I guess these, looking at them, they appear to be closer in skill to the Waterloo game. So I am very interested in seeing what Mark does with this. And obviously, Mark Herman is somebody whose designs we should normally pay attention to, right? So anyway, moving along, playtesters wanted for Red Dust Rebellion, new vassal modules for a whole bunch, or new versions of vassal modules for a whole bunch of things, including a conquest and consequences that includes triumph and tragedy. That's actually pretty cool. Designer interviews include designer of Zizka, Reformation and Crusade in Hussite Bohemia, 1420 to 1421. That is a Levian campaign series. We'll talk about that in a second. Players Aid got with VPJ Arponen, designer of Order and Opportunity, which looks neat. Although I have not pre-ordered that. I'm trying to be extremely conservative with pre-orders, and it's going poorly. Ben Hall also. We had Mike Nagel on, designer of the Flying Color series. We also had Volko on. We had Gina Willis on. All important folks, and all those interviews went extremely well. So check those out. Moving along to P500 editions, there are 6, but only 2 of them are new. Epipoli, that's how I'm pronouncing that anyway, the Athenian expedition in Sicily, 415 to 413. So this is fairly interesting, and we'll open this up to take a closer look at it. This is Levian Campaign Ancients. Now, I am curious to see how the Levian Campaign series will adapt to the Ancients period, because so much of it revolves around that sort of levying troops and all that stuff. Jason W., this is your game. Awesome. Jason, we'll have to have you on the show when it's closer. I am, let's say, not worried that this will make its number. In fact, this has almost 300 orders already, and it's only been up for P500 order for a couple of days. So I think we're going to be fine on hitting the P500 number, is what it looks like to me. All the graphics here are obviously playtest graphics. When we see the map, we're going to see that. But this sounds neat. I'm very curious to see what this looks like. I haven't pre-ordered this. This is the one of the new things that I am tempted by. The other new thing is called Firefight Tactical, innovative, dice-driven World War II wargame at the squad level, designed by Sam London, with whose work I am not heretofore familiar. So I don't really have anything like a strong opinion on this, except to say that I personally, and you can, take this for exactly what it sounds like, just what I'm saying. I don't feel like I have enough room for another modern, and in this case, I mean modern in the sense of 20 or 21st century tactical game. I just don't. I don't care what it is. So something would have to actually come in and absolutely blow my pants off for me to jump on it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this doesn't look interesting. It does sound mechanically interesting. But we'll see what we find out about that as development continues. So there is also a P500 reprint of Illusions of Glory, the Mr. President second edition, and its upgrade kit that we already talked about, and a mounted map for France 1940. Recent P500 editions, all cool looking stuff. Plenty of this has plenty of orders already. 3 Days of Gettysburg already has almost 1,500 orders, so that's doing okay. 1848, Springtime of Nations hit its number, which I'm not sure it did last month, so that's good. I'm very curious to see that. I think I pre-ordered that. I should really go through this stuff, but I think I did. There's not a lot on the revolutions of 1848, and it is an interesting topic. So, the Brief Tease is a medieval battle game in a popular series. That could be a whole lot of different things. I personally hope that it is a new Men of Iron game. I would be delighted should that occur. We also have a wartime economic competition game, which I am simultaneously interested in learning about and worried that it will be a lightly themed Euro type of thing. Now, GMT hasn't been super bad about that, but I would be leery of that based on this description alone. Doesn't mean that that's what it'll sound like when they actually announce what it is. The Solitaire expansion module for one of their all-time best sellers. Interesting. I don't know what that could be. Do the solo card driven CDG solo modules, does one of those cover Twilight Struggle? I thought so, but I haven't bought any of them, so I don't know. So yeah, Rolla Baker, first of all, thank you. Welcome to the stream. Much appreciated. I don't think Europa's Fall of France is any good. I think it really struggles. Just the operational model in Europa, I think, really struggles at that topic. And a lot of games do struggle to model that topic, to be honest. This isn't a problem. That is not a problem that's unique to Europa. And Europa does have some of its own unique problems. There's no doubt about that. So moving along, coming events, PAX Ludica in Cadiz, Spain. Sounds awesome. I will not be there. Game More 2 in Albany, Oregon. Sounds awesome. I will not be there. Fall 2023 weekend at the warehouse. I'm sure it's awesome. I will not be there. Spring 2023. Didn't this happen already? I thought that happened already. Or does that mean 2024? I don't know. AuckCon, I believe this is in Auckland, New Zealand, right? Doesn't actually say that here, does it? Well, that's how I'm reading it. I don't see the word Australia here anywhere, but I think that's in Auckland, Australia, or New Zealand. New Zealand. Auckland is in New Zealand. Neil Bedke, thanks for stopping by. And here's Botos Con in British Columbia. So the Pacific Northwest is kind of hopping. It's what it sounds like to me. Plus, you got PAX up there. Whatever PAX show is up there, or shows, I suppose. SD HistCon in November. That's Veterans Day weekend for those on the West Coast and not the eastern part of the country. Would absolutely want to go to that. I'm going to try and make it next year. We'll see what happens. Here's Candace Harris talking about ancient civilizations of the Middle East. There's a bunch of stuff on Rally the Troops. I don't know that any of these is new, but I still haven't tried Rally the Troops. I haven't had time. The Longest Trench from Udo Grebe Games is in the warehouse. It looks like a card game. World War I card game. Okay. Mr. President, Vassal, and Tabletop Simulator modules. Pretty sure that's not new. In fact, none of this Plantagenet stuff is new. Yes, that is how we're pronouncing it because they were French. Not there yet. P500 items. So take a look at these if any of these look interesting to you. Several of these I think look interesting to me. A couple of them are second editions or update kits, though. A little surprised at Time of Crisis. So that Time of Crisis Deluxe Edition will include the expansion as well. So yeah, I think this is a completely fair sentiment, actually, because I'm not going to friggin' Spain without my wife. And at the same time, if I go to Spain, I'm not 100% sure that I want to sit down and play war games, although I'm sure it is an amazing convention. Beyond Solitaire, Liz, thanks very much for stopping by. Where am I putting these? I guess I'm putting them here. I wish I was making it too, but San Diego was far away and expensive, so might as well be in friggin' Narnia as far as I'm concerned. Eric Hansen, welcome back to the show. Jason W says Rally the Troops is great. Everybody who's played on Rally the Troops says it's great. There's a pretty limited selection of games in comparison to Vassal, and I'm pretty much fine with Vassal, but I should probably check out Rally the Troops just so I can say something about it, other than, hey, here's a Rally the Troops stuff. It looks cool. Again, so North Carolina is closer and much cheaper, and there is better barbecue. So there's that. So barbecue is good in North Carolina. I personally a huge fan of both the Carolina bar, or all three, whatever it is. different styles of Carolina barbecue. That is my personal opinion. So here's some stuff about decisive action, which is Joe Cohn's modern combat game featuring the Russians. The errata is you throw the Russian order of battle in the garbage can at the end, I believe. So I think I heard that. Okay, charging and shipping. Now we're getting to the good stuff. As usual, folks, if you want to read all the little details of what's going on in the GMT update, go read the GMT update. I'm not reading the whole thing off verbatim. I'm just hitting the highlights with a focus on this stuff. So they will charge on Monday, September 25th, which was today, for Downfall, the Downfall mounted maps plus the 3-inch box, plus Great Battles of Alexander Expanded Deluxe, which I highly recommend, plus Tyrant, if you don't have that. And I actually ordered Tyrant because it's going to have the thicker counters in it. And Sovereign of Discord, the Fire in the Lake expansion that starts, I think, in 1963 or 1965 or something like that. It enables you to start your Fire in the Lake game much earlier than you would otherwise be able to do. I did get hit today for Goose Green from MMP and for Tyrant and Sovereign of Discord from GMT. So I got double tapped once again. So isn't it fun? All right. So next charges and shipments should arrive in a few weeks in mid to late October. CNC Napoleonics expansion number 5. CNC Samurai Battle, second printing, Prime Minister, last 100 yards. I have not ordered any of that. Right. I have not ordered any of that, so I am safe. The next Commands and Colors Napoleonics thing in the pipeline, I have ordered, but it is not that. That's just a reprint. So finished P500 shipping include a giant pile of Commands and Colors Napoleonics plus 18 India plus Pursuit of Glory second edition. We just covered the stuff that's shipping anytime. The stuff that's shipping mid to late October at the printer, but there is no ship date yet. But at least some of this should ship before the end of the year. The 2023 replacement counter sheet, Banish All Their Fears, CNC Medieval second printing, and Napoleonics expansion number 6, Epic Napoleonics, that I am on the hook for. Norman Conquest, Men of Iron Volume 5, that I'm very excited about. Panzer North Africa, which I have not ordered, but if you're into Panzer, you'd probably definitely want it. Tanto Manta, which is a prequel to Here I Stand and Virgin Queen. That sounds interesting. Herman Luttman's Plum Island Horror. I'd be shocked if that wasn't a lot of fun to play. And Vijaya Nagara, which I can't remember whether we're still calling that a coin game or coin inspired or not. Because there's been several games that's in the pipeline in various stages that started out as coin games and then turned into coin inspired games. Nova Scotia. No, definitely not. But hey, there's a con happening in Halifax. That sounds cool. Going to the printer late this month or early next month is Rebel Fury. Given the timetable that we're looking at, I would be fairly surprised if that makes it into anyone's actual hands this year. I could be wrong. I could be surprised. You never know where it will fall into the print queue with the printer, but I'd be pretty surprised if we saw that this year. We're going to start bagging these things. All right, in final art and proofing, a jest, I can never remember whether it's guest or jest, of Robin Hood. That's Fred Saval's new game. That looks probably fun. And that's going to be one of those 30-minute targeted playtime games as well. Epic Ancients 2 second printing. Epic Ancients 2 second printing. I'm a little confused by that, but I'm not interested enough to look at it right now. Since I have plenty of Commands and Colors Ancient stuff already. For the People, fourth printing. If you don't have that, highly recommended. France 1940 second edition, plus the mounted map, plus Labyrinth, the Awakening second printing, which is interesting because we don't see a lot of expansion reprints from GMT. Mr. President, second edition, and the second edition update kit. Normandy 44, plus the 3-inch box. And everything else here is stuff that has not changed its status. In the art department, new to the art department is In the Shadows. That is a game about the French resistance during World War II. That will be of interest to some. I have not seriously looked at it, even though it is a potentially interesting topic. Nearing art department readiness. There is nothing new in that list. There's a whole bunch of stuff here from all these fine channels that you should all check out. And some additional art. Here's the cover. Now is when I'm going to back off on the Zoom here so you can actually see the box cover for Rebel Fury. I think this looks good. I am pleased to observe that I was pleased to observe that GMT is making an effort to kind of expand on what I will call the very traditional GMT box look that they have traditionally been associated with for a long time. Not that I don't like a lot of those covers, I really do, but I'm also happy to see them try and do covers that look a little different too. And I think the cover here for Rebel Furies is pretty strong. France 1940 looks like the same as the rest of the games in a series, if we're calling it a series today. So it's going to be fine. Sickle cut map, France 1940 counters. Here's some cards for a guest of Robin Hood. Project updates, American Revolution tri-pack. Editing is ongoing and should wrap up by early October. Oriskany is getting updated treatments. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation or not, and I don't care. Like I said, we're from Ohio. Was Brand asked if In the Shadows was one from Constant Game Jam like 2 or 3 years ago? I'm not sure, but Vijaya Nagara I thought was. And that looks pretty interesting. What else we got going on here? This Fields of Fire Volume 3, the Parachute Regiment, is actually pretty interesting. There's actually some Falkland stuff in there as well. It's British paratroopers. That actually sounds fairly interesting. Do we have anything else of interest here? I don't see anything. All right. So let me pull this down briefly. And before we get into the topic, there's something I would like to address. And I didn't really want to talk about this, but it keeps coming up, and I figure it's going to come up. So I'm going to be watching the chat very closely. And if anybody wants to engage with this, what I'm about to say, that is fine, but you're going to have to try to engage like an actual grown-up and not a petulant child. So just bear that in mind. I will put you in timeout like a petulant child, should it be necessary. But I'm positive that all of the fine and refined people of good disposition who are here tonight will not, in fact, misbehave. So there was a lot of unnecessary drama that came up on BGG this week about a review that was posted of Herman Luttman's In Magnificent Style. I keep wanting to say a magnificent, Most Fearful Sacrifice, and no, that wasn't the problem. And a bunch of people blew up about it for not really any good reason, in my opinion. And the number of straw men began at some point in the thread to outnumber the number of pickets soldiers who were hiding in the shelter of the Emmitsburg Road instead of finishing the charge. So I'm not going to really comment much about that, except to say that it's a great example of the endemic failure of our community to meaningfully engage on topics. Lots of people stamped their little feet and got hurt about it, and there was nothing in any of that was worth getting hurt about. And a bunch of people who had just happened to like drive-bys in the thread caught some shit that they didn't deserve for shit they didn't say. So if we are going to try to be better about this, we need to actually try to engage with people. I fully support, and I told Herman this, and I fully support the right of players to play what they want, and designers to design what they want, and publishers to publish what they want. In return, we get the opportunity to comment on that, but that's all we're doing, right? If you want to have a problem with something somebody said, well, then have a problem with something they actually said and not what you have imagined in some Adderall fueled fantasy that they have said. Yes. So, okay. So let me move down here. So I don't think that the review can charitably. So I'm not going to defend Stuart's review. Okay. Because it's Stuart's review, it's Stuart's opinion, and were I writing the same opinion, and if I had the same opinion as Stuart, and I do disagree with him on a number of the points that I think he made, I think it could have been constructed in a more productive way. Let me put it that way. But Stuart didn't get any bullshit about it. Other people in the thread did. Nobody sent private messages harassing Stuart. other people in the thread got those messages that didn't say anything about that. And that I have a huge problem with. Okay. If you want to criticize something that somebody said, criticize something that they said and not something that they didn't say and weren't trying to imply. And in fact, have bent over backwards to emphasize that they are not saying. So, I mean, there is a question that I think can be asked if we're going to try to have a meaningful conversation about it, of whether Pickett's charge specifically is a good topic for a war game. Okay, I think that's a conversation that maybe we should have. I'm willing to have that conversation if anybody wants to actually be a grown up and have that conversation and not observe what happened in that thread. Now, I'm also not going to try to defend the BGG moderation in that thread. I think it was largely counterproductive. I understand the reasons why BGG moderation works the way it does. That does not mean that I think it works well or is contributing to dialogue or helping in any respect. So there does seem to have been a BGG increased focus on moderation over the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure if that's a thing or if it's this or what. So this is the exact problem, right? It's a whole bunch of, well, not a whole bunch of people, a couple of people had very bad things to say about a specific person that was in the thread that isn't the person that wrote the review. And if you want to take issue with the review, and incidentally, I've talked to both of those people in the last couple of days since all this blew up, and I've talked to Herman and the person whose ass got climbed up in the last couple of days, and they're both fine, and they're fine with each other, having had a conversation and actually talked about it like adults. And that is kind of the point. If we want to try to engage this stuff, let's try to engage this stuff. This is not tonight's topic, so I'm just saying that is a conversation that I think one could have. So this is, I mean, that's kind of the point. And I'm not encouraging anybody to look this up. And in fact, one of the reasons why I think BGG moderation has been counterproductive in this case is you can't see half the shit that was said in the thread. And that's a problem, right? You want to make people accountable for what they said, make people accountable for what they said. I have no problem with that. And if anybody is actually, by the way, saying that you people shouldn't be playing these Civil War games, then I am going to strongly differ with that opinion. And I would like you to point me to where that person said that. And now if that's somebody outside of wargaming, then I don't really care too much because, their opinion is fine. They're right. They're right to have an opinion, but I don't care too much. I have yet to encounter anybody inside wargaming that has said anything like that. What I have encountered is a lot of people railing against that imaginary adversary. I'm just not seeing it. I'm happy to be pointed to an example. Let me put it that way. In any case, I am glad that nobody has completely shat their pants. So thank you very much, everybody here tonight, for not shitting their pants. A review is a review. Piece of critical writing. Actually, like reviews would point out perceived weaknesses. Whether you not agree is up to the reader. I would say that Stewart's review overall was what I would call mixed. He had good things to say about the game. He had bad things to say about the topical treatment. Like I said, that's not a topic for tonight. I'm not prepared to talk about Pickett's charge specifically tonight. But that's a conversation that you could have with actual grown-ups. And to put a not too fine a point on this, 99.5% of the people involved in wargaming are in fact actual grown-ups that you could actually have a talk about this with. There's a couple who aren't. I would say there's half a dozen people that I'm aware of, which probably means there's 3 or 4 dozen people that I'm not aware of. But I mean, the number of those people that I'm aware of that just you cannot talk to them is actually very small. So in any case, no, this is a totally different statement, though. I never said this, first of all. I may have said, and I will say still, I prefer to play the Union in Civil War games, but I'll play the Confederates. Somebody's got to be the bad guy, right? I got no problem with that. But I've never said I will not play Confederates. I may have said I know people who will not play some bad guys, and I think we all probably know somebody like that. I know a guy who won't play the Germans in a World War II game. That's kind of a problem. Like just logistical problem right there. Um, I don't know anything about this. I'm vaguely aware that for some reason people talk about ASL on the Game Squad forum. I think I have an account there, and I haven't looked at it in at least 5 years, so I have no opinion on that at all. So, Bob Kowalczyk, if you could find video evidence, it's not like I'm hiding in the corner. If you could find video evidence of this, let me know, and I will be happy to retract and/or clarify as needed. We both know the same guy, actually. I think John is we're probably talking about the same individual, and I get that, but at the same time, if you want to actually have a game, somebody's got to be the bad guy, right? So there's that. Unless it's a solitaire game, in which case maybe you're the bad guy. That's the way it works. So Brandt has played Champion Hill. That's the new Herman Letman Shattered Union game. And I told Herman, I think I put it exactly this way. There's just nobody's going to stop me from playing Civil War games or whatever other games I want. I fully support the right of everybody to play what they want and design what they want and publish what they want. They're running the money to publish. They can publish what they want. We can complain about it. That's fine. But that's just my opinion or your opinion or whatever. That's all it is. Why do we got to get butthurt about every fucking thing? Anyway, so um in any case, I'm just monitoring the chat to make sure that um nobody is going bananas here. That's all. We're just making sure everybody's being good little folks. Um so I think it would be valuable to have a dialogue about some of these issues. But again, you can't engage with somebody who's just not willing to engage in good faith. That's just not happening. I am also inclined to say I'd like the history to be good history or authentic history to the extent that that is possible within the bounds of the simulation, right? And frankly, I don't know if this is stuff that Stewart is the person who wrote the review. So I didn't say that. And he's doing a podcast with Fred Serval, which I'm listening to. That's the Homo Ludens or Homo Ludens podcast, if you're French. And it's a good podcast. And I'm getting a lot out of the commentary there. And frankly, there's some things that Stewart said in the last one that I just not disagree with, but I would ask follow-up questions as to what, how would we execute some suggested changes, right? So we don't have to all agree. I am happy to be challenged on shit. But if I'm going to be challenged on stuff, then you got to actually probably bring the receipts, right? So I got to tell you, John, what I would say is, John, that's a little weird. I think it's a little weird. But I'm not going to ban you, right? Because that ends the conversation, right? I like to think that I've never banned or blocked anybody, but a very small number of people have banned or blocked themselves. Let me put it that way. I am happy to say that in the history of this channel, and remember, we had video game people here at one point, so this is saying something. The number of people that weren't just like obvious spammers. There's the number of people I've actually had to block from the channel is really, really small. Let me put it that way. So that Mo, this is why there should be dialogue to work this out, right? Grown-ups can have conversations and we can talk about why certain things might be upsetting. Maybe you think they should be, maybe you think they shouldn't be. We should talk those issues through. That might be helpful. That's what I'm saying. And I would like to help facilitate that dialogue. Now, I might have some more stuff to say about this later, but right now, um, I believe I have exhausted what I have to say on the topic. Um, I support everybody involved's right to do what they're currently doing, whether I disagree with them or not. And well, right, but that this is the problem, right? Is where the history might be bad. Um, because let's talk that through, right? How can we better reflect the history? I think that's a very valuable topic of conversation. That's what I'm trying to say. So, as Vince Ree is stamping his feet for Yaquinto and Battleline, let's get to that. Um, I feel like I'm not getting a super duper clean cut on these. These are pretty thick. There was some complaints about the thickness of the enemy action ardens counters, but I think that was definitely not this printing because these are really thick. Anyway, um, this is probably beyond the scope of this show, John. I'm going to say that I don't, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I would probably need to think harder about it. So, and as Brant says, right? So, history is ugly. History is ugly a lot of the time. Sometimes it's not, but a lot of times it is. Let's face it. That makes looking at history and wargaming in this respect a safe, kind of safe space to talk about these issues, right? So, see this. I don't. I'm not actually coming down on you, Nordic Maelstrom, for saying this because I think you're saying it tongue in cheek. But this is something that no one is a position that no one inside this hobby is endorsing. That I have seen. Again, if you've seen it, let me know where it's at. All right, so Yaquinto. I've always said Yaquinto. Could be Yaquinto. I don't know. But let me clean up the other stuff first. We're gonna do Yaquinto first, in part because I have less to say about you. How much time do we have? Shit, we may not get to Battleline tonight. Anyway, that took longer than I thought. I completely agree with this statement of Mo's. TV was Yaquinto. I can tell you that. Okay, so Yaquinto is formed in 1979 by the Robert Yaquinto Printing Company or Publishing Company. I forget what the actual name of the company was. The print as Yaquinto Publications, and Robert Yaquinto, the guy who presumably runs this operation, hires ex-Battleline developers or designers, Steve Peak and S. Craig Taylor, to do a line of mostly historical games. Most of their games are historical. Not all of them. There's a couple of oddballs in. There's a couple of fantasy and sci-fi ones, and there's a couple of just oddballs in there. So let's share the screen. I don't have screenshots for this. Can I move this so it's a little easier to deal with? Yes, that's slightly better. Okay, so probably the best known Yaquinto game is probably Ironclads. Okay, this is the one that was floating around, and this was this was in a box, as I recall. One of the interesting things, I'm saying interesting in a very charitable sense in this case, things about Clark Commander 1983. Mark, thanks for stopping by. One of the interesting things about Yaquinto were the album games. And if you don't remember these, everybody who was around back in the day does remember these because it was a format that was weird, right? Was literally in like a double-sided record album folder. And I don't know if maybe that's what they did as printers. That's possible. But so you would actually have like the sleeves that the LP would normally go in, and you slip the counters in a baggie and slip them in there. And usually when you folded the thing out, that was the map. I felt like this was an incredibly awkward format even back in the day, by the way. But Ironclads, as I recall, came in a box, and this is a John W. Fusler game. And this is American Civil War, ship to ship stuff. And if we look at it, looks graphically fairly basic, but I do see this kind of like turning gauge type of thing, which actually reminds me of Car Wars. John C, I don't know how different this is from Iron and Oak. I've never played Iron and Oak. Is that a no? That doesn't appear to be a successor according to BGG, which I would take to mean very little, to be honest. Um, so pretty interesting looking game. This was later picked up by Excalibur Games, which may still have it available. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure that Excalibur Games is even still open, but I thought they were last time I checked. But they haven't published anything new in a long time either. So I'm going to say one last thing on the controversy part, and this is kind of going to be the standard policy around here. Is I am willing to entertain disagreement. That's fine, but only with people who are actually trying to have conversations, not with people who just want to yell. People just want to yell and be children and stamp their little feet. Then go away. I don't have any use for that. Anyway, nobody here has done that tonight. So thank you all for not doing that tonight. All right, moving on from Ironclads, we have this is an album game, Swashbuckler, a game of swordplay and daring do. And we can see that this fella's doing it with miniatures. Their counters were nice and thick too, by the way. Excalibur, as Jeff Beeler points out, Excalibur is mostly known for their reprints. I can't think of a ton of exceptions to that. There probably were exceptions, but I can't think of a lot. This looks neat for what it is. You can kind of see this is the unfolded album here that they're playing on. I think that's incredibly awkward. But you know, it definitely was a novel packaging. Right? There's no doubt about that. Now this is a T. O'Neill. Who's T. O'Neill? Thomas O'Neill, who has 2 credits. Both of them are with Yaquinto, and then of course S. Craig Taylor, who had a lot of credits and who we'll be talking about later tonight, assuming we get to it. So this is an interesting piece here, and normally I leave these out, but in this case, I feel like, and Jim Ozarski might want to argue with me, but I feel like this is an important enough set of miniatures rules that I might as well at least mention it, while also giving you the caveat that I don't know jack shit about this. This is the Sword and the Flame. This is a colonial era miniatures. I do know that there's still people playing this, and I assume it's got, and it has a bunch of expansions too. Now, who is Larry V. Brom? This is not Gerald Brom, the artist that did a lot of work with TSR. Clearly not. I wonder if they're related. That would be an interesting question to ask. I don't know. Somebody in the chat would probably know. Mel and I could actually yell at each other in the live stream we're going to do from Compass Expo about this later in the year. So that might be fun. There will be lubrication of course of the non-alcoholic variety. All right, so I don't have a lot to say about the Sword and the Flame. We're going to try and move real fast, but I do have some things to say, not too much because I haven't played it, of Panzer. This is a James Day game, and Yaquinto back in the day, and these were boxed games, by the way. Yaquinto did Panzer and then 2 expansions for it, Armor and 88. Armor is, I thought, well, 88's is North Africa, as I recall. And we're just getting North Africa now with the GMT version of the game. So Panzer is originally published by Yaquinto, eventually passes through the hands of Excalibur Games. And I don't know, Mo, we'll figure it out at the time. It depends on the whatever crappy thing we bring to drink. I promise to bring something to actually drink this time, as opposed to last time where I just forgot. I just forgot to take that preparatory step. So, apparently Larry Brom is the late Larry Brom. We're sorry to hear. So in any case, this passes through the hands of Yaquinto. Somebody said up thread that Excalibur, Perfidious Albion says that Excalibur did not do a good job with the reprint. And apparently that made him mad enough that he went over to GMT. Well, I would say that things have gone fairly smoothly at GMT, considering that has sold a lot of copies, has a lot of fans, and Stigler hates it, and it is getting a bunch of expansions. So there's that. I don't think I've ever highlighted, by the way, a Decision Games pre-order before tonight. By the way, I mean honestly, other than the magazines, which you might see more coverage of soon, but other than the magazines, the Decision's output is not that high. So in any case, Panzer. And I'm not covering Armor and 88 separately because ain't nobody got time for that. But Connecticut iced tea, Connecticut smuggled across the border from Connecticut. So let me. I keep getting dragged back into this. I feel like Al Pacino. Also, let me say that I will absolutely stick up for Herman. I meant to say this. If I was going to talk about this at all, I wanted to say this. I will absolutely stick up for Herman as a stand-up guy. I don't believe for a minute that there are any bad intentions on his part. Everybody loves Herman Luttman. He is not only a fabulous designer, but he's a great guy. I've had nothing but extremely positive personal interactions with Herman, and I consider him a friend. And Herman Herm will be fine. There was a weird thing where he got banned from BGG for like an hour, and no one knows. I don't know why. I don't know if they provided him with a reason or not. But it was just one of those goofy things. Anyway, let's move along. Wings. This is an S. Craig Taylor design. This is plane-to-plane combat in World War I. I have heard very good things about this. And Stigler, what do you think of this game? I think you had an opinion about this, as I recall. This is also in a box. Interestingly, a lot of the games I'm highlighting from Yaquinto were in boxes rather than in the weird packaging. So there's that. But this is what it sounds like. It's plane-to-plane combat in World War One. The counters look pretty good for Yaquinto counters, and they were nice and thick, but they have center nibs, which I hate. So there's that. I'm not crazy about this 3-piece map, but what are you gonna do? When is this? Like 1985? This is 1981. So I think Yaquinto stops making new games in about 1983, by the way. And as far as I could tell, the printing side of the company did continue, but it was bought out by Carta Mundi in the 2000s at some point. Now, I think that's the company that makes or at least made Magic cards. So I still haven't played Air Force. It's on my list of things I want to do. But it is on my list of things I want to do. All right, here we go to CV, and this is in a box as well. This is an S. Craig Taylor game. Recreates the famous and decisive Battle of Midway. Now, it's my understanding that this is pretty similar to Flat Top. And that means that the only reason I don't have it is, frankly, because it's a Yaquinto game, and they're not super hard to get. They're not super expensive, but they're not super easy to get either. We have a Noble Knight price, $50. It's not bad. By the way, I bought. You'll see me talk about it either next week or before that if it shows up on time. I bought something stupid, and you'll see a note about that. So I have seen copies of Wings, and I'm not sure I've ever physically seen a copy of CV before. This is super duper interesting. So as a successor, as Neil Bedke points out, to Flat Top. French Foreign Legion. This is another of the album games, the weird format. Larry Brom, Vernon J. Stribling, and E.R. Teuber. That's interesting. And it does look like a Roger McGowan cover. A game of desperate fighting in a desert force. It is based on a genre of movies that feature hard-case legionnaires defending a desert fort against hordes of fanatical tribesmen. Okay, so this is generic, is what I'm hearing, and not based on an actual thing. So to me, that strikes me as intensely uninteresting. So, but it is one of a relatively small number of games about the French Foreign Legion. So there's that. So if that's a topic of particular interest, I think you can do better. So this I have seen. This is the Great Redoubt, the Battle of Borodino. It is in a large flat box. I want to say that it's a flat box. It's about an inch and a half and roughly the same length and width as a GDW flat box, roughly at least. It's not in an incredibly huge game, but as you can see, you've got these rectangular counters, and I believe you rotate these to indicate either rotate to them to reflect facing, but also to reflect column or line formations, which is a thing that we've seen in several other places. And here's the inside of the box. Not a terrible looking map either for the era. Reasonably interesting game, and it's my opinion that anything from S. Craig Taylor is worth at least a look. A lot of his stuff, in my opinion, holds up extremely well. So Neil Benke says, Great Redoubt, Pickett's Charge, and Thin Red Line, all the same system. Did I pick up Pickett's Charge? Well, how about that? Here's Pickett's Charge. Here's the Yaquinto Pickett's Charge. So, as Greg Taylor thought it was a good topic for a game. A detailed tactical, but I didn't get the impression that this is a game just about Pickett's Charge. It looked like a game about the whole battle. I mean, look at this map, right? Pickett's Charge is maybe 2 hexes here. So not the length of the charge, but the length of the advancing line is maybe 2 hexes at this scale. So this is not a game about Pickett's Charge, so we get that out of the way. But it is as Craig Taylor. It says a detailed tactical game of the battle, but then the scale looks kind of like multiple brigades per counter to me. I don't know if that's the case, but it's kind of what it sounds like. And there's definitely a little bit of a callback to Avalon Hills Gettysburg here, one of the editions of Avalon Hills Gettysburg, with the rectangular counters and the strange choice of orange for the Confederates. I guess maybe that's the scan, and it could be more of a butternut in actual reality, but I don't know that. But in any case, like I said, this is probably of some interest. It does not go for a pile of money, and I don't know that anything from Yaquinto goes for a large pile of money. Here's Battles and Leaders, which I thought was fairly interesting because of the cover. Actually, it's a pretty unusual kind of cover. Battles and Leaders. This is tactical combat in the American Civil War. This is a Steve Peak design, and it is a hex-based game. And as once again, we've got the rectangular counters here, which apparently they liked at Yaquinto. And once again, I don't know what size these units are supposed to be. Companies, perhaps. I don't know that it says, and it doesn't say on the counters. 509 counters. So, and once again, this is another one that, as I recall, was in a box. Now, I remember this. This sat on the shelf at the local game store forever back in the day. The Beast Lord, Michael J. Matheny. And this is, I think, another one of the more remembered Yaquinto games, because I destroyed a keyboard, and unfortunately it was a laptop keyboard, not one that I could easily replace, by spilling scotch on it too, and that was a crime against both keyboards and scotch. So John C., you'll be back. It's all good. Iced tea. It's delicious iced tea. Anyway. Truthfully, the best thing about Canadian whiskey is it's often relatively cheap. That said, there is good Canadian whiskey. I just don't know enough about a Canadian whiskey to really comment intelligently on it. I can give you recommendations for rye or Irish whiskey or Scotch or even bourbon, although there's a lot of bourbon I haven't tried. Anyway, moving on to the Beast Lord, and this has this weird Yaquinto counter tray in it too. That has no lid as far as I can tell, so it's kind of worthless. But I don't know this, but I wonder who did the map art for this thing. It doesn't say here. I'd be very interested if anybody knows who did the map art. Oh, no shit. I guess I'm not totally shocked by that because he was working for Avalon Hill by then, and that is basically a complete redesign. Got nothing to do with any of the earlier versions of Gettysburg, so I'm not hugely shocked by that. In fact, I think we've probably mentioned that in the past. Ugh. I mean, so on the one hand, if you are enjoying Crown Royal, more power to you. On the other hand, um, if you want to mix Crown Royal in something that you're going to serve me, that's probably going to be fine. But to Crown Royal neat is like a friggin' horror movie, man. I'd rather drink my own bodily fluids than drink Crown Royal neat. Thomas Bandy, welcome back to the show. Thanks for stopping by. So it doesn't say who the map artist is here, but I'd be real curious to see who the map artist was here. The counters are, and this is a fantasy game, and I would say these are not the most awesome counters I've ever seen. There's no doubt about that. Now the cool thing is that if you go to the liquor store, they've got these dice bags there, and they're really nice. And when you buy one, you get a free bottle of whiskey with it. So there's that. And I have actually, ugh, no thanks, no thanks. Um, I will drink Secret 7, it's like a 7 and 7 though, but like that's a mixer, right? I mean, at that point, who cares? Um, so anyway, moving on from the Beast Lord. Next we have Beachhead. This is another Michael Matheny game. That There we go. All right. This is Island Invasions in the South Pacific, and this is another of the album games. And I wonder now, looking at this, whether it is this sounds like generic bullshit too, to be completely honest about it. As opposed to trying to reflect actual engagements. So that's truthfully something that I'm not hugely interested in. And again, just because, um, honestly, just because it doesn't there's no like history there, right? It's just all right. Well, it's generic era battles of this particular era. To me that's not interesting at all. So so there's that. Um, Now, I saw this and I'm like, I saw this in an article somewhere, and and I said immediately, "Oh, they got this mixed up with the Dallas game from SPI." But no, they did not. This is a board game. This is the Dallas board game, which presumably Yaquinto paid a pile of money for, and which looks awful. So I don't have anything else to say about this. This is a 1980 design. This Steve Peak is the designer. Steve Peak did good work elsewhere, but I mean, to be fair, this is not a game targeted at me, right? But I'm not sure I even remembered that this existed. We're done clipping for the evening. Let's put this over here. I'm not sure I even remembered or knew that this existed prior to stumbling across it in this listing. And then that's it. That is it for Yaquinto. So let me pull this down and pull up the other screen, which I will reorient, and we'll talk. We got about 45 minutes to talk about Battleline. So it's my opinion that Yaquinto nowadays, while they did do some stuff that I think was noteworthy and worth at least a casual glance nowadays, I do think they're not a company with a large legacy in terms of impact of their games or of the designers that work for them or of innovation. They did some interesting things, but by and large, their stuff has not been picked up elsewhere. The one exception being the Panzer games. I did miss Mythology. I missed that on purpose. Um, and and Time War was them, wasn't it? I think I forgot about that. I didn't mean this doesn't need to be necessarily comprehensive. In any case, there you go. There you go. If we're gonna have like a CRT to shoot JR, then maybe it's a war game. I mean, maybe that makes sense. I'd have to examine it mechanically. Vince Reed thought Beachhead was terrible. I'm prepared to believe that. It looks kind of bad. If my casual analysis of it is accurate anyway. All right, so Battleline. Battleline gets started in 1973, and it's a Steve Peak and S. Craig Taylor operation for the most part, as far as I can tell. And I think our order here is going to be more or less alphabetical. Indeed, it is. The interesting thing here is I don't know what the details were of their acquisition or the acquisition of their games by Avalon Hill, but what I have noticed is that the great majority of their games were, in fact, brought back by Avalon Hill and usually stuck around for quite a while. This is one. This is Air Force. So the Battleline version is in some cases, the when Avalon Hill redid the Battleline game, they would give it a very light touch. I think this is not one of those. So there's Air Force that Battleline did. There's Air Force, there's Dauntless, and there's the Air Force expansion. Now, Avalon Hill does Air Force, also does Dauntless, which is again an expansion for Air Force, but they didn't include the material, as far as I could tell, that was in the Air Force expansion. So they didn't quite do all of it. This is possible, and unfortunately, this is one of those things where I do have to say it's the late S. Craig Taylor. That's too bad, because I think this guy did a lot of tremendous work that has a lot of impact still today. Most did. There are some exceptions, but most did stick around, and in some cases, it was technically past their prime. But in the case of stuff like Chancellorsville, it may have been just shit sitting around in the warehouse since the 1960s too. So there's that. So Air Force, I do have this in the Avalon Hill edition. It looks neat. I understand it looks pretty fiddly, but I'm okay with that. And this is my excuse for not buying any other World War II air games other than the Battle of Britain games, the 3 Battle of Britain games that I already have. And whatever else I happen to have. I think that's an accurate statement. I've got the Burning Blue, I've got RAF, and I've got Battle Over Britain. Battle Over Britain, which is another John Butterfield game. So I feel like I'm covered for World War II air. Now, all 3 of those are kind of more operational. Air Force is plane to plane dogfights and stuff. It does look fairly fussy. It is, while not mechanically as similar as this statement would imply, it is kind of a wooden ships and Iron Men type of treatment for World War II air. Mo, thanks for stopping by. Much appreciated. So moving on is Alpha Omega. This was brought back by Avalon Hill as well. And I'm not sure if I remember whether the Avalon Hill version was in the flat box or not. I thought it was. The picture we see here is the Avalon Hill version, I believe. And then this is the Battleline version. And Battleline used the 1-inch flat boxes, which in cases like Flat Top, boy, that was a bad fit. And we got these weird clear plastic nugget trays. I don't know what these are called. I call them nugget trays. This is a sci-fi game of some kind. I never looked at this particularly closely. Even though I liked sci-fi, I liked it at the time. The counters actually look interesting, to be honest. I don't really know anything about this, to be honest. It seems kind of tactical, and tactical sci-fi space combat is something that I'd need to like tie to an IP or something like that. I would want to put it in like Star Trek or something like that and play Starfleet battles. Circus Maximus. This is a kind of a classic. I think this is a Michael Matheny game, and I think there's a Don Greenwood contribution when it makes it to Avalon Hill. I think that's how that played out. Vince Reese says Avalon Hill did not improve upon Battleline when it comes to a box or flat top. No, in fact, they made it worse by mounting the maps. The Battleline maps are not mounted. They're actually a little easier to deal with. The Avalon Hill maps are mounted, and it is almost impossible to get everything back in that box without destroying the box, even if it's not punched, strangely enough. So Circus Maximus is a classic. It is kind of simmy, so you got to kind of be aware of that. There's still people that love this thing, but a lot of people, nobody would design a game this heavy on chariot racing nowadays. Okay, so we had Circus Minimus was a Dean Essig design from the Gamers, which you could still get up until relatively recently. and which is not exactly a high price collectible. And it was a much lighter chariot racing game. And then you had the Charioteer game from Sekigahara guy, whose name I'm just blanking on at the moment. Somebody will put it in the chat. Yes, everyone hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, Patreon, all that stuff. Um, and that's by shit. I can't remember the guy's name. Matt Calkins. Charioteer, which came out relatively recently from GMT, and that's supposed to be pretty good. I've got Circus Maximus, and Circus Maximus, if I'm going to play chariot racing, Circus Maximus looks like my kind of thing. So I also have Monster Coliseum for RuneQuest, which I kind of feel was like an attempt to, you know what would be really somebody wearing a tie at Avalon Hill said, you know what would be really cool? We just got this RuneQuest thing from these weirdos from California, these Chaosium people. Wouldn't it be cool if we if we redid Circus Maximus in this RuneQuest thing? And that's how we got Monster Coliseum. I wouldn't be shocked to have been the fly on that particular wall in that particular meeting. Wouldn't have been shocked. Anyway, moving on, Custer's Last Stand. This is another one where it's like the Alamo, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, it's a very one-sided affair. This was a little bit less one-sided than that. At least the battle was. And this does appear to be a depiction of the battle. Now, the map is kind of interesting. It's kind of very minimalist. I think this is dated looking, but I actually think it's effective. And it's on that sort of light blue, at least is what it looks like. It's on sort of that light bluish cardstock stuff that Battleline used for their maps. The flat top maps were definitely like that. Now we'll talk about flat top when we talk about flat top, which will be in about 45 seconds. But this is a Richard Zalud game with decent looking counters. And if I haven't mentioned it, at least in some of their games, these Battleline counters are crazy thick, crazy. So, see, unfortunately, I sympathize with this, but the show's like 20 years old now. Okay, all the actors are old. Some of them are dead. You cannot bring Firefly back anymore. It is too late. I think we got as close as we were going to get when we had The Expanse. Let me put it that way. Even though tonally the two shows were very, very different, I felt like I was getting just as good a TV sci-fi experience with The Expanse as I got with Firefly. In many cases, better. Eric Goebel, I'll be honest, if I like let my hair grow for about 8 months, I could 100% pull off Londo Mollari without a wig and with minimal product. So that's just the kind of hair I have. Nathan Fillion, also old today. Now again, if we did Firefly 20 years later, I'd watch that, but it's really too late. And everybody, it did not pull the numbers, right? Serenity, the movie did badly, the show did badly. Admittedly, they changed the time slot every week, and that was part of the reason. But it was also this thing that was like, oh, it's a space western. That's weird. People didn't get it. And then people watched it and they were like, this is great. The people who watched it all liked it. So I meant, Perfidious Albion, I meant what I said. So moving on, Flat Top. This is one of the greatest war games of all time, in my opinion. This is an S. Craig Taylor design. It is Carrier Campaigns in the Pacific. A certain designer is working on a follow-up to this. I don't know about a follow-up to this, but let's say Carrier Battles in the Pacific, and I'm very interested in seeing what they come up with. But that's down the line, and it's too early to talk about, and I don't know that it was said it may have been said in confidence, so I don't want to talk about it. So here's a picture of the Battleline box, which is not a bad box. At least it's catchy looking, although the title itself does not jump off that box because the contrast is just not right. If you look at the Avalon Hill map, I forget which one is which. So one of the two maps, this is the Avalon Hill version. One of the two maps has a few more hex rows on it than the other version of the maps. The Avalon Hill maps are mounted. I think it's safe to say the Avalon Hill version is much easier to find nowadays. They also renumbered the hexes between the two editions of the game for reasons unknown. Oh, geez. So great question. My guess is, so I've played Flat Top multiple times. I love Flat Top. It's a fabulous game. I have Second World War at Sea, Coral Sea, and I have not played it yet. The sense that I have is that Coral Sea, Second World War at Sea, Coral Sea from Avalanche Press is a much more straightforward game system than Flat Top is. Flat Top is not really complicated, but it's fairly complicated, and there's a lot of bookkeeping. Coral Sea's got a lot less bookkeeping too. So there's the thing that I would man, Castle has been off the air for like 10 years now, but there were a lot of Firefly references in Castle. I agree. Um, I mean, there's the thing in where Castle in the show dresses up as Mal for Halloween. So, Eric Goebel, thank you so much. So yeah, let me mention this. There will be a game design production and update thing in October, probably around mid to late October. So I don't want to do it all like a Monday show on that all that often, but I will do it occasionally. So the target is about every 2 months. So you'll see a show on that topic in October. So thank you, Eric Goebel. That is much appreciated, and the support is much appreciated as well. We have made pretty good progress. So uh uh I think I saw this and it turned out to be bullshit. Now I'd love it if it were true. But I would it's probably bullshit. um So anyway, Schlegler loves Flat Top, as we all should. This is a fabulous game. So I have the highest opinion of this game. BGG's rating is good, but maybe not amazing. I think this game is an absolute classic. And frankly, if it were in print today, I think it would people would be playing it more. The fact is, it's kind of hard to get in either version. The Avalon Hill version sometimes goes for as much as $150. These are all cheap, but man, and another thing is it's very hard to find copies of Flat Top in good shape because the box is absolutely doomed. It is very, very hard to keep those boxes in good shape. Even mine, which came unpunched, has blown corners. Joss Whedon has. It turns out Joss is kind of a douchebag. So I guess I don't recall the specifics, and I don't want to get into it without looking into the specifics. But nobody really wants to work with him anymore. I'll tell you that. Whether this is true or not, I don't know, but I can vouch that the Battleline counters, the Avalon Hill counters, are not exceptionally thin, and the Battleline counters are almost twice as thick as the Avalon Hill counters. They are crazy thick. Alistair Logie, not in my opinion. Really, I mean, you're going to have problems with storage in either case. They both have a lot of counters, but the you're going to have a hard time getting it all back in the box in either case. I want to say the Battleline box might have been a little thicker than the Avalon Hill box too, in addition to having not mounted maps. I've heard good things about the Firefly board game. I played it once and it did not jump out at me, but that may have been a personal fatigue situation too. I don't know. All right, Fury in the West. This is a game about Shiloh by Steve Peak. Do we have the other version? So the very strange, not really strange in the sense of, oh, that's weird, but in the strange sense of very few covers like this in wargaming, where it's a photo cover of a book, a candle, and the game. This is the cover of the Battleline version. It's a weird cover. Um, The problem is Firefly lost money for everybody that's produced it. That's kind of the problem. So I mean, I'd check it out if they did something, but I also Disney confidence not super high. They've done good stuff. They've done bad stuff. So I passed on Seas of Thunder personally. It may be just my visceral reaction to the map. That's a factor. But I'm not hearing a lot of buzz on it either way. So I don't know that anything I might have to say about Seas of Thunder, other than the observation that I don't like the map, would be it's nothing like Flat Top. That I can tell you. All right. I found this pretty interesting actually. And it's sort of this weird area movement thing. Insurgency, a game of political and military conflict set in a fictitious underdeveloped country. So I'm not really big on games set in fictitious countries, okay? That said, I gotta wonder if maybe there's something interesting going on here, and if this was maybe an inspiration for somebody like Volko or Brian Train. And the next time I have Volko or Brian Train on, I will ask them if this was an inspiration, if I remember, which is incredibly unlikely. So there's that. Yeah. So the Avalon Hill Fury in the West cover. So this is another one where Avalon Hill redid the box as this Battleline box was a flat box. Avalon Hill redid it. They did it in the bookcase box version, and it's supposed to be pretty good from what I understand. Yeah, this sort of generic thing. It doesn't. You've removed history from it, right? Which in turn makes it kind of a mechanical exercise. And maybe the mechanics are very clever or even brilliant. I don't know, but you have in removing a historical subject, you have removed 90% of what gets me to push the button and buy a game anyway. So it's very difficult to get me motivated to buy one of these things. Now, if we actually just say, "Hey, this is a fantasy game," then that's a little bit different. Or a science fiction game, okay, that's a little bit different. But even then, I don't buy that many of those either. I do buy some, just I don't buy none. It's just not that many. All right, Machiavelli. This is another um kind of a weird cover, although not as weird as the Fury in the West cover. So I believe this to be basically diplomacy, if that is correct. Um, well, this sounds interesting. Insurgency designers knows Blake Miller, W.H. Smith's designer. Blake Smith's debrief regarding his AID mission in Vietnam. That sounds interesting. Mark Hodgkinson has played Seas of Thunder, a lot of dice rolling, but wants to try it again. Stacking limit. Yes, please do let us know how that goes. I'm very curious. Um, this is kind of an interesting cover, and I gotta say, it's probably more interesting than this cover, which is the Avalon Hill cover. And I always loved how Avalon Hill put that disclaimer on the cover. Avalon Hill's trademark for its game of power politics. Is that the verbiage that you like legally were obligated to use? Maybe, I don't know. But this definitely looks like well, BGG's not calling it a diplomacy clone, but it kind of looks like a diplomacy clone. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to say. Perry Sparopoulos says it's better than a couple people saying it's better than diplomacy. I'm not a huge fan of diplomacy, to be honest about it, because I'm basically antisocial. And I don't like to knife people in the ass. I'd like to people to understand that I'm out to get them when they come into the game and not believe I am their friend and then I knife them in the ass. So there's that. All right, Naval War. This is a card game by S. Craig Taylor and Neil Zimmerer, and this was also moved over to Avalon Hill. And I think this is probably the Battleline cover. This is the Battleline cover. Is that a square box? Maybe. This looks like a very light card game based on World War II naval combat. This is the kind of thing I might play at a con. I would never buy this because again, it's not a history game. It's just random. It's a card game, right? It's probably fine, but it's supposed to be easy to play. It's reasonably fun. I'm sure it's fine. I'm not crazy about that Avalon Hill cover. I got to be honest. I'm not crazy about the Battleline cover either, but I felt like the Battleline cover was at least interesting. All right, this is another one. This is Patrick Price, and this is interesting because it. So it says strategic simulation, but then you look at the map, and this looks like an operational game to me. Um, of Sherman's Atlanta campaign. That's pretty interesting. There's not a lot of games on this. There's not zero. It's not Atlanta is ours or bust. But there's not that many games on this. There's the Atlanta campaign, the very old Atlanta campaign that came out of Guide on Games, maybe by Jack Green. Is that right? Oh, now I'm thinking that I'm talking bullshit, to be honest. So A game on an interesting topic by a designer that I don't know a lot about and who only has this credit, at least according to BGG. Sometimes BGG's, I don't know if you guys know, sometimes BGG is full of shit. Um, but rather a lot of counters too. Um, for what it's worth, I like NATO symbols on my counters, even for U.S. Civil War. I'm aware of the anachronism there. Um, Dark green maps. Who does that? People doing battles with a lot of woods on them. I think this map is. It's not the greatest map. Let me put it that way. It does have the characteristic battle line thing of hex numbers in the middle of the hexes, which is weird and I think aesthetically displeasing. Objective Atlanta. That might be the game I'm thinking of, actually. Wait a minute. Are you talking about the Atlanta campaign? Because this is Objective Atlanta. I think you're talking about the Atlanta campaign. And actually heard good things about that. And a new edition of that came out not too long ago as well. So anyway, interesting looking game. This did not get picked up by Avalon Hill. Here's Samurai. This went to Avalon Hill. S. Greg Taylor didn't have anything to do with it as far as BGG knows. This is interesting. Samurai game of politics and warfare in feudal Japan. And then when we look at the map, it's an area map. This got picked up by Avalon Hill as well. Yeah, see, this is one reason I say those games, those very old Avalon Hills, very old. Tactics 2, Blitzkrieg. I think they're not interesting now because there's nothing about history in them, right? I don't think this is a particularly hideous map. I won't stand Atlanta campaign map. That's not a hill I'm going to stand on either. This is okay looking. This looks like the Battleline version though. And we can see, where is it now? Here's the Battleline cover in sort of these unusual square boxes, not an Avalon Hill box. But then you go to the Avalon Hill box cover, and it's like clearly the same art, but they put this in, they repackaged this in a bookcase box. I don't know a lot about this. This looks kind of interesting. What the fuck? Oh, this is okay. This is a homemade project. Expanded Samurai Battle Board. That's kind of a cool homemade project. I think you'll agree. It is one of these games with a pink box. I'm not sure why. Nor am I sure why Avalon Hill redid this one and not the Atlanta campaign. All right, 7 Days Battles. This is a Steve Peak game, very early. This is very early battle line, and you can see once again we're with the pink here. Why are they pink? Nobody knows. Are the Union at least blue? So okay, cool, they're blue. This kind of smells like a rehash of Gettysburg to me, but that's a superficial, very superficial thing to say based just on what I'm seeing off the maps and the counters and the blurb. Certainly, this is not a great map. This looks like a playtest version. I mean, I wouldn't release if my playtest map looked this bad. You wouldn't have seen it. Let me put it that way. But I got a lot better tools than they had back in 1973. So there's that. This is true, and I'm mostly recovered from that. Mostly. So the 7 Days Battles is 1862, and McClellan decides instead of marching against the Confederate capital of Richmond, he is going to amphibiously land forces on the Virginia Peninsula and march on Richmond from the east. They make good progress for a little while and then get blocked by the Confederate army under Joe Johnston. Joe Johnston is wounded fairly significantly at the Battle of Seven Pines and has to recover, and Robert E. Lee is placed in charge to replace him. And Robert E. Lee does not leave the army of Northern Virginia as its commander until the end of the war when he surrenders to Grant at Appomattox. So this is the beginning of Lee's reputation as a great commander. I do think that if one studies the battles in this campaign, one is going to come away with a more nuanced portrait of Lee as commander. But I don't know that this game necessarily will give you that. There are I'd have to look at this off the top of my head, however. We have On to Richmond, which is a GCACW game on the 7 days campaign. But that's an operational game. We have the Brigade Combat Series from the Gamers, which did all the battles in the 7 days in I think 3 or 4 different volumes. And that's the only complete tactical treatment of the entire campaign that I am aware of, all the battles in the campaign that I am aware of. There are a couple other ones, but I think I would want to do a little bit of digging. Those are the ones that spring immediately to mind. It is a super interesting campaign, especially at the operational level. Less so at the tactical level. But then again, Seven Pines is itself a pretty interesting battle. And that's the only one I've even looked into. So yeah, so yes, so this is true. I forgot about this one. I should have remembered this because this was pretty recent. I want to say this was 2023. It might have been 2022. There was the 7 days battles. I think that's what it's called. That's part of the Civil War Brigade battle series from Worthington, which is a very light system. Lighter, I think it's lighter than Blind Swords, but I also think it's less tactically rich and has a less has a more confined decision space than Blind Swords does. I personally, of the 4 Civil War tactical or grand tactical series on my radar, it's probably my least favorite, but I still think it's decent. I think if you're in the market for a really light treatment of these topics, I think you could do worse than looking at that system. I didn't like the Antietam game, but we did like the Shiloh game. Those are the 2 that I've played. So I suppose this is true. Yeah, I'd have to think a little harder about this too. But also, I'm seeing a lot of commanders that you didn't see a lot of in my dissection of the Order of Battle for Death Valley too. All right, moving on, we have Shenandoah. Now, this is another one. This is a Steve Peak and S. Craig Taylor, and this is the Valley campaigns. Tell me we have a picture of the map. Unfortunately, we don't have a good picture of the map. We've got this enormous counter sheet. Um, this is an operational game, and based on the design provenance here, I would say there might be something worth looking at. Then again, I do have Stonewall in the Valley, and I'm kind of covered on the Valley campaigns as far as I'm concerned. Um, so don't know a lot about this, but it looks like an operational game on the Valley campaigns of 1862 and 1864, which is nice. So this looks intriguing. Doesn't look like it goes for giant piles of money, but it doesn't look like there's a lot of them available. So this is interesting, and I think this is another one that did not make it to Avalon Hill. This stayed with Battleline. Submarine did eventually make it to Avalon Hill, and this is again a Steve Peak design. And if we look here at this has got to be the Battleline map with the numbers in the middle of the hexes. That's another thing that they did is sometimes they use an alpha numeric code for the hexes, where you have a sort of alphabetical hex column and a numeric hex row. And they changed that between the 2 different versions of Flat Top. So the log sheets are not interchangeable. This looks like it might be interesting, actually, if you want like a sub game, like a tactical sub game. This is the kind of topic where I would be a little more forgiving about not necessarily reflecting actual engagements. That's an interesting board. What are these folks doing for the board? That looks a bit homemade. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that's just the Avalon Hill versions of the boards. That's plausible. That's plausible. I'd probably go for the Avalon Hill version of this. Generally, other than the counter thickness, I think that Avalon Hill presentation was generally better, but it does vary from game to game, and in some cases, the difference is marginal at best. This is true. I'm real. Excuse me. I have poo-pooed the blue and gray system in the past. This specifically is the game that makes me want to give it a closer look, but I'm unwilling to go buy a copy of blue and gray to do that. So there's that. This is true, and I think that's actually true of all of the battles in the 7 days. Is the Confederate losses were greater than the Union losses, absolutely and proportionately. Then again, the Union would retreat afterwards because McClellan was uh, not decisive. So, to some extent, maybe we can blame his intelligence apparatus for that, and to some extent, maybe that's an excuse for McClellan, right? Trireme, Arnold Hendrick and Ed Smith. Arnold Hendrick is a name that has come up before. This is one of the very few games about ancient naval combat. The fact is, we don't really know a lot historiographically. We don't actually know that much about ancient naval warfare. And even some of the things about what triremes look like are not quite firm. So the there's very few games about this. There's this, and there's War Galley, and there's maybe one or two other ones, and that's about it. There's a couple of miniatures games too, if you want to deal with that, but I don't have anything to say about that, so you'll have to go elsewhere. Jim Ozarski is the guy I would talk to. So these are some pretty nice looking miniatures, and yes, you could totally play this as miniatures, which I, got no problem with. It's cool. I just don't want to deal with the miniatures. So once again, a kind of horrid magenta box in this case. And when Avalon Hill got to this is one where I would say get the Battleline version if you can. Because when Avalon Hill got to this, they did it in that weird one-piece board that warped before it even left the building. These boards are among the worst, not the worst, but they're right down there. They're bad boards. I have this, and my board is unforgivably warped, and I would have to put a thick ass piece of plexi down on it as well. I got no problem with them redoing War Galley. Let me put it that way. I've got it, so there's that. Stigler hates Road to Richmond. If nothing else, though, I mean, part of the charm of the quad games, by and large, part of the charm of the quad games is they're all really simple. You can play them all in a sitting. That's worth something, right? Are you going to get a great simulation or maybe a great game experience out of it? Great simulation, almost certainly not. Great game, maybe. It kind of depends on the game and the quad. But at least you are not going to invest 200 hours into it. So there's that. So, next up is another one that I think, unfortunately, maybe it stinks. I don't know, but I think I'd have been curious to see what would have happened had this been redone by Avalon Hill. Viva España, game about the Spanish Civil War. Interesting topic. There's not a ton of games on it, but there's more now than there used to be. Let me put it that way. A quite attractive, I think, by Battleline standards map. I mean, some of the old Battleline maps. I mean, the flat top. I love flat top, but let's face it, that map is not a graphical masterpiece. Okay, it looks like they did it with a Sharpie. I'm not sure Sharpies were even around at the time, but if they were, they used them on that map. This is more attractive. I kind of like the color palette here. There is kind of looks like there's at least 2 and maybe even 3 different browns, which is maybe not optimal. But I don't think this is an ugly map. Let me put it that way. And kind of detailed, looking kind of detailed. So this is an interesting looking game. Now, like I said, this is an Alan Eldridge design, and I don't know anything revised version of the Spanish Civil War. Come on, BGG. Oof, by Yagged Panther Publications. Holy cow. This does not look like the same or even a particularly similar game. Maybe it's got the same DNA. Now, I'm not crazy about these counters, to say the least. Registration looks dodgy as well, but they do look like Battleline counters. So there's that. Nice and thick center nibs. Anyway, last we have Wooden Ships and Iron Men. This is a timeless classic as well. And in fact, of the Battleline games that made it so, the Battleline games that I think continue to resonate today are the ones that made it to Avalon Hill for the most part. Okay. And of those, I think that the two at the top of that list, again, games that had a lot of impact that continue to resonate today, that are, I think, just as playable today as they were back in the day and hold up really well, are Flat Top and Wooden Ships and Iron Men, both of which are S. Craig Taylor designs. Um, we are totally finishing this thing tonight, by the way. So, this is a terrific game. It's detailed. It's fairly detailed. It's not as detailed as Close Action, but it's more detailed than Flying Colors. I think depending on what you want out of an Age of Sail game, you may come away from this with the opinion that this is a far superior game to Flying Colors. I think it's reasonable for people to come away with an opposite conclusion, right? For those who have tried to play Trafalgar in this system, for example, that's a project. Much easier to deal with a battle that size in Flying Colors. I'm waiting for my Anglo-Dutch Wars expansion for that, by the way. I've played Close Action. I like Close Action, but it feels very, very Starfleet Battles to me. There's some neat stuff in Close Action. I've got all three of the sort of the big trifecta of Age of Sail naval board war games: Wooden Ships and Iron Men, Close Action, and Flying Colors. And I like them all. Actually, I wouldn't have. I've got Fighting Sail too, but I've never played that. And that Sails of Glory, is that what it's called? That's supposed to be good, but it's miniatures, and I don't touch dirty miniatures. Nordic Maelstrom will be playing Flying Colors solo in October or November. Those are all good games, so you do what you want, but you're not really going to go wrong in any of those. Stag Limit has played Trafalgar and Wooden Ships and Iron Man. You can do it. It's just a project. There's a lot of ships. In a system this detailed, it's just gonna it's cumbersome. You can do it, but it's cumbersome. Nordic Maelstrom agrees with me on the Anglo-Dutch Wars. I mean, that's primarily a naval conflict. You could do a land Anglo-Dutch Wars game, but you'd really be talking about a series of postcard games. You know what I'm saying? Where the naval stuff you could do some interesting things with. So Wooden Ships and Iron Man, absolute classic. Let me pull this down. We'll continue to riff on whatever else we got for the remainder of the time. So for those, there might be a Tuesday video at this point. On Tuesday, it's unlikely. On Monday, at this point, it's unlikely. The Anglo-Dutch naval battles did tend to be very large, and that's why you'd have a hard time doing it in Wooden Ships and Iron Man, and why Flying Colors would be better. But I'm waiting for them to do that, right? So you could, Andrew Atkins suggests using Flying Colors and then zoom in with Wooden Ships and Iron Man. There's too much overlap of scale between Flying Colors and Wooden Ships and Iron Man or Close Action. They're both fundamentally at the same scale, but Close Action is more of a squadrons game, and Wood Ships and Iron Man and Close Action are more of a ships game, where each person is running a couple of ships. So I don't really think you could do this. I don't think this would work or be. And if you looked at the game side by side, I think you would come away with the conclusion that this is not necessary. There we go. Eric Hansen is using it to do the battles that happen in a glorious chance. I think that's a great idea. I think you could totally do that. And it's good for frigate actions too. That's a good point too. So there's a big capability difference between the big ships of the line, the big first raiders, and the average frigates of the day, right? So this is a valid point too. It's a lot easier to run frigates in Wood Ships and Iron Men than ships of the line, just because they got less, right? I've got everything for Flying Colors except for Surface of the Seas, which I hope they do reprint at some point. Not going to hold my breath till I turn blue in the face on that. But Andrew Etkin, thank you so much, much appreciated. So anyway, we may see another video tomorrow, but at this point, that's unlikely. We may see a video on Thursday. That is a stronger possibility. There will be a show with Dan on Thursday night featuring Decision Games with Doc Cummins as our very special guest. I don't think Doc has ever done a video interview before. I could be wrong. We are going to start talking about Decision Games and the history and how they acquired the S&T and SPI and what the relationship is with Desert Fox and all that stuff. That's what we're talking about. So Doc is our guest this week. The show card is already up. It is scheduled for 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. I do really, really, really want to get the Mr. President video done just so I can get the fucking game off the table. It's just eating so much space in there. I want it to go away. So I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. It's not going to be like me crapping on it for 20 minutes, but it's got issues, and we talk about that. But I may run a stream of consciousness Callendale-esque style review instead, just to get it done, rather than trying to work out of an outline or something like that. For those who have not seen it, last Friday, thank you, Daniel Brown. Last Friday, we did a special show, which was kind of an interview and kind of a show and tell, from the top secret OCS playtest event in Baltimore. That was run by designer Tony Burkett and OCS series honcho Chip Saltzman. They are great guys. We hang out at Winterfest every year, and I will see them again at Winterfest this year. And they are working on the rest of the Ostfront trilogy. We're calling it like a trilogy plus because it's going to be 3 big games and 1 small game. The small game is about to come out. That's Crimea. News out of that session is that Crimea should be shipping in the next couple of months. Maybe even tighter than that, to be honest about it. It's real close. And then the next one after that will be Forgotten Battles. And then after that, it kind of depends how the development pipeline works out. But Tony is also working on a big 1945 series, which sounds very exciting, I got to tell you. So check that out. We ran for, I think, just over an hour, and there's been a lot of views and a lot of compliments on that video. So check that out. Oh, no. I think they had 10. I think they needed 12. Based on the pace that they were, I mean, admittedly, the density is high even by OCS standards in those. But I think, I don't know. It's hard to say. You might have trouble physically fitting 12 people around that table. But in terms of division of labor, it sounds like it might have worked better with 12. They had 10, and they got through about 10 turns in a week. So this is true. This is true. Stacking Limit, thank you so much. Well, so I think there's a great discussion to have about Sickles' move on the second day at Gettysburg, right? But Sickles believed that he had won the battle for the Union, that was a decisive thing. And I mean, you look at what he's doing, and you're thinking, "Oh my God, this is stupid." And Meade is going to go nuts, which he does. But then he sucks a lot of Confederate manpower up defending that position, and his corps gets wrecked. But in the meantime, he consumes a lot of Confederate manpower, which the Confederates are less able to absorb than even in the short term, like for the next day, than the Union is. So there's I think a case to be made that our friend Devil Dan Sickles contributed meaningfully to the Union victory at Gettysburg. I think you can say that. I could easily do thinking about this, getting back to Civil War here for a minute, because I've been itching for more Civil War gaming lately, because we haven't played a Civil War game in a few months. And so I kind of want to do Civil War. I've been working on Death Valley as far as the organization goes. So I've been thinking a lot about Civil War even before this bullshit blew up over whenever that was. I'm not giving Sickles quite this much credit. Sickles was a political appointee. We saw political appointees perform very badly in a number of respects. I think Sickles performed in some respects better than a lot of the political appointees. Well, at least in some of the political appointees. Some of these guys were boneheads, right? McClellan was a fabulous administrative general and a complete bonehead on the battlefield. Braxton Bragg got the job because he's Jeff Davis's buddy. He sucked. He only kept the job because he's Jeff Davis's buddy. So there's examples on both sides. I've been giving a lot of thought about this, and I mean, I could easily do a 6 episode series just on Gettysburg and different parts of that battle, right? Little Round Top and Gulf's Hill and Pickett's Charge and the wheat field and Devil's Den and the initial cavalry battles with the Iron Brigade. I mean, I could easily do that. Now that said, maybe we have some room for so I have not played it in Magnificent Style, okay? And I am only vaguely aware of what a push your luck mechanic is. I don't believe I've ever played a game with that mechanic, at least not that I knew about. So my understanding of In Magnificent Style is that it's terrific. Everybody seems to like it, and in fact, I think that's one of the reasons for pushback is that everybody likes it and everybody likes the designer, as opposed to the similar review that came out from the same person a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago at least, of Jeff Davis, The Confederacy at War, whatever the Ben Madison game from White Dog is called. I think part of the reason why that went over without anybody really getting upset about it was because that's kind of a turd. In Magnificent Style is, by all accounts, an excellent game. Now, it is a solitaire game. You play the Confederates. There's a push your luck thing, and it's kind of you march your dudes up the field. I will point out, and maybe this is reflected in the mechanics, and maybe it's not, is that the marching formations. You got Pickett and Trimble and Anderson. It's not Anderson. Don't all just march straight forward, right? Two of them kind of march at a diagonal into the Union line, and then Pickle. Oh my God, Pickett has to uh, uh, veer to the left, kind of marching in front of and parallel to the Union lines. That can't have been awesome. So I mean, I think you could have a discussion about Pickett's Charge, and not necessarily solely about its treatment in war games. I'm not sure there've been a lot of games about Pickett's Charge specifically. And I do think if, based on the mechanical game that it is, I do think it's kind of a natural choice, right? On the other hand, can you really get a good game out of Pickett's Charge? I don't know, but a lot of people seem to think that Herman managed it, and Herman is a great mechanical designer, so maybe he pulled it off. So all right, so I want to get back to Advanced Squad Leader Spotting Round asks, which game would be a good intro to Civil War battles for a noob? My guess would be that Rebel Fury from GMT might be a good choice. Stigler might recommend, and maybe has recommended, Great Battles of the American Civil War. For a noob, I do not recommend that. But on the other hand, if you're an Advanced Squad Leader player, then just the complexity on the face of it is not really going to bother you too much. Don't start with Into the Woods, though. Start with Death Valley or with something else. And those are battle games rather than campaign games. Roll of Fury looks like more of a campaign game. I have a very high opinion of the Great Battles of the American Civil War system. I have a very good opinion of, for a noob, I probably recommend Blind Swords. That means go over to Revolution Games and see whatever they have that's available. The Day Was Ours is first bull run. Or is it second bull run? I think it's first bull run. They've got I forget exactly what's available. I have them all except for the Devil's to Pay, which is the first day at Gettysburg. I like Longstreet Attacks. It's the biggest in that series. You can also investigate A Most Fearful Sacrifice, which is a related system, and that's from Flying Pig Games, but that is also out of print again. So, and you've missed your chance to win a copy, courtesy of my good friend Herman Lettman. So, and I talked to Herman. Herm's going to be fine. So John Madison asks, and again, this is something you could do a whole show on, right? Could the South have won in any way to get an armistice and separate if things went more in their favor? I think so. I think that is a discussion you could have, and historians will differ on that subject as well. I think so, though. But there is, some of the narrative around that is based on accurate things, right? That the North's got more industry. The North's got, the North has all the immigrants because the immigrants weren't going to go south. There's no jobs there. The slaves are doing those jobs. Their economic underpinnings of the war. That's just the way it worked. That's part of the reason why the northern economy boomed and the southern economy stagnated. They were still making plenty of money before the war started. After the war, they did less well because they got blockaded. But no, I think they could have, and I think Lee knows that. Like Lee recognizes that there needs to be a decisive Confederate battlefield victory in a major battle, and he never got one. He got some victories, but none of them were decisive. Maybe that looks like a destruction of a Union army, but no army of any kind was ever destroyed in the American Civil War. And in fact, in general, in 19th century warfare, it was rare to have an army destroyed. Napoleon even only managed it. Depends on how you define that. I would say, by my definition, he managed it about three times. So we've got different people saying different things. I say yes. I think the South could potentially have one. Is the margin of success narrower for the South than it is for the North? Yes, I think it totally is. Um, they were close, never as close as at Chickamauga. And that's one of the reasons why I find Chickamauga to be one of the most fascinating battles. Into the Woods looks like a Confederate victory on the first day. Union turns it around on the second day. Who won? Looks like looks kind of like a stalemate, or not my stalemate, but a bit of a draw. In the same sense that you could call Antietam a draw, but had the South, I mean, if Albert Sidney Johnston wouldn't have got himself killed, that might have helped too. Most senior general in the Confederate Army, after all. So there's that. It's not solely down to the economics. Okay, there's a lot of armchair generaling and politicianing about this, and as well as debate in by historians. But remember that I can point you to a book, and you can read that book. But when you read that book, remember that the guy, whoever wrote the book, has an opinion. They have a position, right? They are not their words are not appearing ex nihilo on the page. They do not lack a viewpoint. Now that's fine. You may agree or disagree with that viewpoint. You just have to be aware of that there is one, and that the next book you read will have a viewpoint, and it might be different. Keep reading the books and make up your own minds. But I say yes. Sword and Bayonet should be out fairly soon, and that is going to be an ideal entry point for Great Battle of the American Civil War. The downside to Swords and Bayonets, and Stigler's probably going to be mad at me for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway, is they're all battles that you may not be aware of, because they are by definition small battles. You're not going to get Gettysburg or Antietam or Chancellorsville or Chickamauga or Shiloh or South Mountain or any of the battles you've heard of. You're going to get small engagements that are easy to learn the system on. Even in Death Valley, a lot of the battles aren't name battles, right? I think the biggest name battles in Death Valley are probably Kernstown and Cedar Creek, whichever Kernstown you decide. Across 5 Aprils might be great, but it's been out of print for 35 years. I'm not going to recommend Across 5 Aprils. I'd rather send somebody to battle him from Compass and Eric Lee Smith, which is a similar system. So there's that. I'm not sure if Stigler has answered this or if he knows off the top of his head what the price tag is, but it's on P500 right now. Go to check it out on GMT's website. Longstreet Attacks is probably my favorite blind swords game, but it is the biggest, so bear that in mind. This might be true. I am a little unclear as to, without that major Confederate battlefield victory, I'm not really sure the 1864 election goes the other way. If a Union army is destroyed in early 1864 or that's not really going to happen in 1864. But in 1863, then maybe I think that's the only way that election goes the other way. It's not like that election was close. It was not close. So there you go. $55, $38 pre-order. That's dirt. $38 is dirt cheap. Um, oh God. Oh God. So I have mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, I'm not going to recommend Terrible Swift Sword to anybody either because it's a million years old and not a print. But it is easier to play than 3 Days of Gettysburg. I think you're getting a better simulation out of 3 Days of Gettysburg. I'll say that. Napoleon does come closer to Austerlitz. He comes closer to a couple other places. One of his sort of questionable ones is at Ulm. Does he destroy Mac's army? Not really. He just forces them to surrender. But it does eliminate an entire coalition army, right? And that's a huge deal. Now, on the other hand, in the annihilation or destruction of an army tends not to happen in the single battle. It tends to happen in the battle and then in the ensuing pursuit. And in the battle and ensuing pursuit after Jena Auerstadt, the Prussian army is fucking destroyed. So this could happen. This could absolutely happen. So yeah. Now that's not to say I think you should not grab swords and bayonet. Right. I anticipate that there's going to be a hot action for that game because it's going to be uh, uh, because it's going to be a good introduction to the series. As Nordic Maelstrom points out, Newmarket does have some nods, and there was a movie about it. Field of Lost Shoes was about Newmarket, or has Newmarket in it, I should say. Those cadets are the characters of Field of Lost Shoes. So, so that's got a little bit of and other games in that battle like Port Republic and Cross Keys have seen war game treatments before, relatively well-known ones from SPI. So there's that too. Uh, why would he do such a thing? That would have been a very ungrant like thing to do. Yeah, the Anaconda plan, Winfield Scott's Anaconda plan. I think there. I mean, you really shouldn't look at anything like this. It's a complex conflict, and the reasons why it happened and the reasons why it evolved the way it did do not lend themselves to things you could write out on a postage stamp. But absolutely, this was a huge factor, right? Cutting the Confederacy in half by taking control of the Mississippi was a huge factor. I'd love to see P. Ridge Stickler get to work on this. There you go. There you go. There you go. All right, we got to wrap this up, folks. So, this is true. This is true. It wasn't his army. He left, and then it got destroyed. So, so there's that. In any case, I will be delighted to talk about this, and maybe we'll pick Civil War as our topic next week. But I've been working towards this, and I didn't get the images pulled down, and I wanted to, but I had lawnmower guy here, and hey, it's fixed, so I'm happy. At least I can get. All I need to get is like another 10 mows out of this fucking mower. Anyway, yeah, okay, okay. I'd have to think a little harder about this, but it didn't go great. But Grant was not real big on giving up. Oh well, shit, this didn't go well. Let's give up. No. That's why Lincoln loved him. So anyway, and Russ Rollo Baker, Vicksburg same day, right? I mean, that's a huge factor as well, and there is a historical slant toward the Eastern Theater. That there are reasons why that pseudo historical narrative developed the way it did. We're not going to get into that tonight, so we should, where the history is bad, however it is, if it's in games or books or whatever, we should get better, right? That's what we're saying. So anyway, I really like Wagram in Aspirin Essling, and actually, I'd love to see a Civil War sort of a Civil War equivalent to the Library of Napoleonic Battles, and we're not getting that out of Blue and Gray, unfortunately. So anyway, we got to wrap this up, folks. We are almost 15 minutes over, so I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We still have tons of people here. Please do thumbs up the video if you haven't done so already. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We'll be back next week. We will be back on Thursday with Dan and Doc Cummins. That's very exciting. Stigger's going to love that show. And we are going to have a very interesting conversation, I think. So tune in for all that. And whatever other videos we have coming down the pipe. Like I said, I am behind. So I would like to thank everybody for coming out. Also, big thanks to the patrons, and if you want to help contribute to the channel, help support the channel, that's all much appreciated. We're over 7,000 subscribers. We'll do something else special when we hit 8,000 subscribers, I'm sure. I haven't mentioned this until now. I may do a sale in the next couple of weeks, just frankly because I need the money. I've got a few things that should go for decent change. We'll probably slip a little bit of that money to Mark Ruggiero as well, but I'll see what I got. I got to actually put it together and think harder about it, but I might do that. We'll see. All right, folks, we're going to wrap it up. So thanks everybody for coming out. We will see you all next week. Thanks for watching.